Dr. Feinberg, just earlier last month, Mr. Mikhail Bogdanov met with Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif, during which they discussed various aspects of regional affairs, cooperation, and so on. Now Iran is also partaking in a vast exercise of the Russian Navy, which is taking place both in the Mediterranean as well as in the Caspian Sea. Just the Iranians are only participating in the Caspian Sea to avoid any regional collusions with Israel and Egypt. But at the same time, we see more and more cooperations on military as well as economic affairs. Give us a little bit of an understanding. How far and how significant is this cooperation right now?
So at the moment, we've just seen an unprecedented escalation of this rapprochement between Iran and Russia, with Russia using for the first time the Iranian airbase of Hamadan in order to conduct strikes in Syria. I would like to recall that this is the first time since 1946 that Iran is hosting a foreign power to conduct strikes in a third country. So at the moment, we're seeing on the surface, if you wish, an escalation of a rapprochement that is taking place, that has taken place for a few years. And I would like to give a little bit of an insight of the reasons of this rapprochement. From a Russian perspective, the possibility of seeing Iran switching to the American camp, to the Western camp, is a sort of a nightmare. And the Russians, since 2010 and 2012, are doing every possible step in order to secure the strategic partnership with Iran. And the Iranians, I would disagree with you, are not the minor partner. There on this, there is a real power struggle between the Russians and the Iranians in Syria. So the Russians are doing every effort in order to gain the confidence, the trust, and securing this strategic alliance. And of course, this escalation and this unprecedented move is part of this. Along with this, and this is the Russian master coup, they're building upon this rapprochement a tactical alliance between Iran and Turkey. And this is the master game that the Russians are playing, because they put the Turks into the play, and they're pushing the Turks to exit the Western Sunni coalition and to refrain from supplying forces to the Islamist groups in Syria.
Dr. Fainberg, when we're talking about, you claim that they're equals to a certain extent in this relationship, and Amir Oren and Mir Javed Anfar claim that they're not equals and Russia has the upper hand in this story. But at the same time, we see President Vladimir Putin saying and already announcing that he will go to Tehran and meet with President Hassan Rouhani and discuss the various regional aspects and further cooperation between the two countries. Is this indeed in order to try and calm the Iranian side, or is there something or an ulterior motive behind the scenes that will bring Russian interests to the forefront?
Well, it can be also moved to calm the Iranian side, because we've heard several outbursts out of the mouth of the defense minister and other leading politicians in Iran. But look, if we look at the larger picture, it doesn't come out of the blue. This move by President Putin is also a response of the international pressure that Russia is being submitted to at the moment. We're seeing Russia that is going through a very difficult economic period, part due to the economic sanctions. We're seeing, despite the picture of political stability, we're seeing a lot of cracks within the elites and some signs of internal political destabilization that is perhaps the reason why there is a rotation of elites now within Russia. The Middle East is the key card for President Putin to negotiate with the Americans, with the Europeans, an exit from the sanctions regime, stop to the pressures exerted by NATO or the impressions of pressure as it is perceived by Russia. So what you see when you see President Putin going to Tehran, this is a response to this. This is not only to calm the Iranians, it is also a way to create a crisis in order to exit the crisis that exists at the borders of Russia in Ukraine.
Dr. Feinberg?
Well, they do need Hezbollah, but at the same time, they're playing a very complex and smart game by, at least at the declarative level, protecting the interest of Israel. So they're not, their alliance with Iran, as much as the Iranians don't trust the Russians as well do not trust the Iranians, and they don't have the same endgame, as you've mentioned, as the Iranians do. They don't want to see the recreation of the Persian Empire in the Middle East. They want to balance between the Sunni axis and the Shiite axis, and by the same token also protect the interest of Israel, not necessarily out of love, but out of realpolitik, because they know that Israel can spoil the entire Russian game in Syria.
Dr. Feinberg.
I would say that there were already 2 incidents that were quite serious incidents, even though they were downplayed in the press, that the Syrian airspace is very small in this particular area where the Israelis, the Russians, and 14 other states do operate. So the risk of incidents remains very high. And that brings me to my last point, that as much as Israel has tried to stay neutral or outside the Syrian arena, we're seeing with the Russian-Iranian alliance or the possible creation of this triangle, Turkey, Iran, and Syria, that Israel might become attracted, absorbed into this big powers competition on the Syrian soil, and this is a risk for Israel, or Israel needs to develop its own strategy in order to anticipate the risks associated with this.
No, please.
This is true, but regarding the Turkish-Russian alliance, I just want to point out that there seems to be an ongoing, very strange deal at the moment, that the Russians started to sever their ties with the Kurds in Syria. This is something new that we haven't seen, over the 6 years of the civil war in Syria. They're turning a blind eye over the Turkish strikes on the Syrian coastal city near the border with Turkey. And here is a new element. We don't know where it is going, but it is, I think, quite worrisome.
Well, we're running out of time, so I'll give each and every one of you a sentence to conclude your...
There's been a lot of talks about, the Russian-Israeli love affair, and that, this whole deal and rapprochement with the Iranians doesn't have any real security impact on Israel. This being said, Israel needs to watch the developments in Syria with greater interest, especially in light of the fact that the Russians are currently developing new initiatives on the Palestinian question.